Well, India has done its best performance ever on the Ease of Doing Business ranking, up 30 spots, scoring a century. Joining us now is Amitabh Kant, CEO of the Niti Aayog, a man who had predicted that India would break into the top 50. We're not quite there yet, but he's hopeful that we will get there. Mr. Kant, always a pleasure. Thanks very much. You had said 50 in 3 years when this government came to office. It's not 50. 100, so we have covered significant ground. But what needs to be done to ensure that we actually improve on this ranking considerably? And I'll point out some of the areas where we continue to do poorly. For instance, in dealing with construction permits, it's improved from 185 to 181. Starting a business, 155, we're actually down a place to 156. So where do you believe we've fallen short, and what more can be done to actually ensure even a better performance?
Yeah, Shireen, first of all, I'm a great believer that India can easily, jump into the top 50 simply because there's great political will. The first meeting which the Prime Minister had addressed to the secretaries, he talked about making India easy and simple. The Prime Minister has been a great believer in structural reforms. I mean, the country has pushed for major structural reforms. GST, RERA, bankruptcy law, scrapping laws, 1200 laws, all these are major structural changes, the kind of which the country has never seen before. Now, while we've jumped 30 positions, it's a remarkable achievement. Actually, India has jumped, in the last 3 years, India has jumped 42 positions. From 142 in 2014, we are at 100 now. So we've jumped 42 positions. Now, we need to make this, push this momentum and get into 50. Now, my view is very simple. Just focus on, one, it's very difficult to get construction permits in Mumbai and Delhi. You need to make it online. Paper documents are spread in several documents. Make it online. No human intervention there. Registering a property is very, very complex. And thirdly, enforcement of contracts. Enforcement of contracts, actually, frontier to distance, we've gone worse. The number of days we've gone worse. And this shows that you can reform, you've carried out reforms within the government, but it's very important to carry reforms in commercial courts, ensure that there are no adjournments beyond 3 days, and the number of days within which the commercial cases are solved is much quicker, much faster, and that we are able to establish commercial courts at district level.
So on the issue of enforcing contracts, you're saying we've actually we've done worse, but if you look at the headline number, we've actually done better because we've improved from 172 to 164.
Yeah, that's... if you go do a more detailed, in-depth analysis, the number of days is longer, the judicial processes have increased, and the distance to frontier has actually increased in enforcement of contracts. So actually that's the area. From 166 position, we need to jump radically. It's very doable.
So what will it take to jump radically on that particular parameter?
One, establish commercial courts at district level, Delhi, Mumbai, number one. Do online record management of courts, number two. Thirdly, I think it's very important that don't give more than 3 adjournments, which is what the Civil Procedure Code entails. And we give adjournments ad nauseum. So we need to bring them down to just 3. And you will see India making a big jump.
On the other issue that you just talked about, which is registering property, and again, we've actually dropped quite significantly there. We're at 154 now versus 138, so our performance is actually worse than last year. What do you believe has gone wrong there? You just talked about one of the big structural changes, which is RERA, for instance. But what seems to have gone wrong here?
I think registering property, the complication is that property documents are spread out in too many places. If I have to register a property, I go from a court to the land record office, to the registering property office, too many places. We need to bring in a titling law, and we need to digitize everything. And once you do this, in fact, Niti has prepared a titles law on land records, so that it's not just registering, but it will give you the title. And some states, we are asking some states to push for that reform. And eventually, in the long run, you need a titling law, and you need to digitize all your land records and ensure that across departments, it's all online transactions.
Are you disappointed, Mr. Kanta, that on starting a business, we've actually dropped another point? We're down to 156 versus 155. I mean, this was our aspiration of making it easier to start a business. You were the one who launched Startup India, for instance. Is this an area of concern and disappointment?
Actually, starting a business has become far more easier in India. It's really become easier. You can register a company in one day. You can do a MSME in half a day, actually. But the processes have not yet been cut down. I think we need to converge, integrate. We need to digitize more. We need to make our processes far more easier and simpler. And I think that's a work in progress. So you'll see a major jump next year on that.
On this specific indicator?
On the registering of...
What are the changes that you anticipate?
I think there are several, that's a lot of work in process, and actually the Department of Company Affairs has made radical changes. But it's not shown up in the respondents. What happens with the World Bank survey is not that you've carried on changes.
Yeah, it's also stakeholder feedback.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's about whether it's actually been implemented on ground. So while a lot of work has been done, it's not shown up in the respondents. And probably next year, this will be the area where India will see a huge jump.
At the end of the day, it's great that we've gone up 30 spots and we're now at number 100 as far as the ease of doing business is concerned. But eventually, we would like to see this translate into more investment on the ground. Do you believe that while this is good news from a messaging perspective, especially from a business confidence perspective, it will encourage any change as far as the investment cycle is concerned?
Shireen, let me first tell you that it's a huge achievement for India. It's a huge achievement. No country in the world has made such a big quantum jump over 2-3 years, 42 positions. It also shows India's commitment for reform. It also shows that Prime Minister has lived up to what he had talked about, rolling out the red carpet. But it's important to understand that structural changes of this nature take a little while. And we need to just continue the momentum in a very, very big way. Keep pushing for change. Keep pushing for structural reform. Keep ensuring that they get implemented at grassroots level. But the good thing is that these kind of reforms have actually led to a major inflow of foreign direct investment. I mean, India has been the largest recipient of foreign direct investment. We've been the #1 recipient, beating China. Our FDI has jumped up by over 61% at a point of time when FDI across the world has fallen by 16%. So we've demonstrated India's great ability to attract foreign investment. And now we need to ensure that, like the foreign direct investment, we must push for domestic investment. Indian private sector must have great belief in their ability to create wealth within India.
But do you have confidence, sir, that we are now on the cusp of seeing a recovery?
I'm absolutely confident. With major reforms like this, with the reforms like RERA, with the reform, I think part of the problem is that the private sector had created overcapacity. Part of the problem is that, there were a series of judgments about cancelling telecom licenses, coal licenses. There was a legacy. So we are at it now with the latest structural reforms of NPAs, with the banks, with capitalization of the banks, a big thrust towards banking sector reforms. And I personally foresee that in the next 7 to 8 months, you'll have the private sector getting back into investment as the global economy picks up. As global demand goes big steam ahead, you will see a lot of momentum on the private investment in India.
Okay, you're hopeful of a pickup in private investment. Let me end then by asking you, Mr. Kant, because there are different opinions coming in from various quarters of government. The finance minister believes that we should stick to the path of fiscal consolidation and that recapitalization of banks perhaps is the best form of stimulus at this point in time. Do you believe that that fiscal consolidation and the fiscal discipline that this government has exercised over the past 3 years, that is the path to follow? Or do you believe that even if it means a little bit of looseness to try and stimulate the economy, that at the cost of the fiscal deficit target of 3.2%, that's okay?
No, I'm a great believer in fiscal discipline. I strongly believe that the last 3 years the government has done a tremendous work in bringing in fiscal discipline. We must stick to it in a very determined manner. This alone will send the right message across the world. But it's also important that you need resources to push for investment. I mean, after all, the government has more than made up for the private sector investment through its investment in railways and roads, etc. And to be able to do that, we need to push for for strategic disinvestment in a very big way. We need to push for many of our roads which have been completed, many of our airports which have been completed, where projects are de-risked, where revenue streams are already flowing in. And that is what the cabinet has decided through the Bharatmala scheme, that a substantial component of it actually will be raised through sales of roads.
Yes.
And that will enable them to push for more and more investment.
You know, while you're talking about monetization of road projects, on strategic disinvestment, and your former vice chairman was very public about the fact that he was disappointed with what had happened, the slow pace as far as strategic disinvestment is concerned. The government is also concerned on the non-tax revenue front. Do you feel that we could perhaps pick up the pace on strategic disinvestment, or do you believe that, you know, in this financial year at least, it's going to be hard to see any big ticket divestment?
DIPAM is going to cross its target. It's going
that's largely on account of the OFS, etc. that's going on. Yeah.
But I think out of the 4 tranches of strategic disinvestment that NITI has recommended, over 34 public sector units we've recommended for strategic disinvestment. I think 3 tranches have already been approved by the cabinet. The 4th one is going shortly. But on all these, I think the DIPAM has moved forward, and in about 10 or 11 of these companies, you'll have action very quickly, very fast.
You're still hopeful of that?
No, I'm very hopeful. I think the momentum is happening.
So 50 by when? You had said 50 in 3 years. 50 by when?
I think maximum, you know, if you were to look at, and I've done this analysis, I did my due diligence, that if India was to focus on construction permits, enforcement of contracts, registering property, and trading across borders. And definitely we'll jump up on starting a business. So these 4 or 5 areas, you know, I mean, the great thing is if we focus on these, we'll make a big jump forward. But Shireen, the important thing is that India has moved up the rank in 6 out of 10 indicators.
Yeah.
But in distance to frontier, we moved up in 8 out of 10.
That's right.
That means we are very close. We are very close
to the international best practices.
Yeah, to the best practices. And therefore, we just need to bash on in a very vigorous, very determined manner, and we'll be there.
Absolutely. Well, that is the big hope at this point in time. Mr. Kant, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us on CNBC TV 18 with your thoughts on the World Bank Ease of Doing Business ranking. With that, from all of us here at the NITI Aayog, goodbye. Thanks for watching.